Of all the heroic tales of war passed down from ancient days, few have fired the imagination like the upland march of the 10,000. How a mercenary army of Greek men-at-arms, trapped deep in the enemy Persian Empire, survived an epic journey through a rugged land, over vast mountains, across high plains blanketed with snow, until at last they reached the shining blue of the sea to seek their native land. Through the first-hand memories of Xenophon, a student of the philosopher Socrates, who found himself in the ranks of this army for hire, the tale of the 10,000 still echoes through history, a real-life story to match the deeds of myth. The journey began with a call to adventure, and for Xenophon and the army of 10,000, the call came from a Persian prince. Some 80 years before this time, Greece had been invaded by Persia's empire led by the king Xerxes. But his ambition had come to nothing, his armies destroyed by an alliance of the remaining Greek cities at the battles of Salamis and Plataea. The old king Xerxes had returned to Persia and died to assassins 15 years later. A succession of kings had followed until it was Artaxerxes II who sat upon the Persian throne as the 5th century BC came to a close. But Artaxerxes had a brother. Cyrus the Younger bore the name of the Persian Empire's heroic founder and led a life in pursuit of glory, a pursuit that led him now to covet his brother's throne. Famed and popular for victorious leadership, he made plans to turn his armies upon Persia itself to overthrow his brother and crown himself Persia's great king. But to do this, he needed more might than he already had, and his experience told him precisely where he could find it. Long had he watched the conflicts among the Greeks from his province of Asia Minor, as the decades-long Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta tore their land apart. It was, in the end, Persian gold supplied by Cyrus that gave the Spartans the advantage they needed to defeat Athens at last. So it was to the west that the prince now turned for more troops to swell his ranks for the revolution. He paid well for the enlistment of 13,000 Greek mercenaries to join his own armies, of whom the mainstay were a force of 10,000 armored Greek hoplites. And when the plans were laid and the armies were gathered, Cyrus showed his hand at last, marching to the capital of Babylonia and igniting a civil war. This long march against the Persian king brought the Greek mercenary force, thousands strong, deeper into the heartland of the Persian Empire and far from home, persuaded by Cyrus's promises of the wealth he would pay them and the glory they would win for themselves. Through the rich country between the Tigris and Euphrates the armies passed, the seat of empires stretching back to the days of legend. And trekking across this land among them was the young Athenian named Xenophon, whose memories would one day capture the fateful events of Cyrus's war in a classic memoir. He had joined the expedition at the invitation of an old friend named Proxenos, an officer in the mercenary army, whose letter inspired Xenophon with the chance of a grand adventure and a valuable friendship with the future king of Persia. Xenophon had remained unsure of whether or not to go join Proxenos, and so decided to consult the wisest man he knew, his teacher Socrates. The philosopher foresaw danger for Xenophon from his fellow Athenians, who might brand him a traitor if he were to fight for a Persian usurper, especially one who had supported the Spartans in the recent war against Athens. But he advised his students to consult the highest authority of all, the god Apollo, at the hallowed oracle of Delphi. Xenophon did as Socrates advised, and undertook the journey north to Apollo's mountain shrine. But in his heart, by now, the decision had already been made, and the question he put to the oracle was not whether to stay or to go, but to which gods he should offer sacrifice to best protect him on his voyage to the east. And so Xenophon left behind his teacher and his homeland, and now found himself in the fertile plains of ancient civilizations, marching ever further into the Persian Empire. And soon enough, the day of battle came, when before their path stood arrayed the great Persian army, led by Artaxerxes, the great king himself. Emerging from the dry land through a cloud of dust came rows upon dense rows of glistening armor and shining spear points, horsemen arrayed in white, bowmen with light wicker shields, troops from Egypt with long wooden shields that guarded the whole body, and in front of them all a row of chariots, their wheels fitted out with razor-sharp scythes to mow down the ranks as they raced across the field. Both sides drew up into formation, the rival brothers Cyrus and Artaxerxes facing off in the center of their lines on the Babylonian plain of Cunaxa by the river Euphrates. The commander of the Greek mercenary forces, Clearchus, held his thousands at the right flank, and Xenophon, as he relates, himself gave word to Cyrus the prince that preparations had been made. With a thundering roar, the battle began with a rumble of hooves and cries from the ranks, and the distance closed between the armies under a haze of dust. But when the order was given, the thick mass of Greek mercenaries on the right rushed forward at a speeding pace, causing panic among the Persians by the sudden headlong charge. Unable to react, the chariot drivers lost control of their horses and dove to the ground to fight on foot, while the uncontrolled horses dragged their bladed chariots wildly around the field, trailing blood and confusion all through the Persian ranks. But the action in the center, as the two brothers faced off with rival Persian armies, took a turn for the worse. There Artaxerxes stood, surrounded by a bodyguard of cavalry 600 deep. The ambitious Cyrus knew the only thing standing between him and the throne was his brother's death, and he spurred his horse into a fierce gallop straight for the royal line. He killed the commander of Artaxerxes' bodyguard, which threw their defense into disarray, exposing the king for a killing blow. But here the valiant Cyrus's hunger for glory got the better of him. Abandoning all judgment, he cried out that he saw his enemy, and raced toward his brother the king, far outpacing his own guard. Cyrus raised his spear, and with the trained arm of a soldier whipped it through the air at his brother. His aim was true, but the cast wasn't enough, striking Artaxerxes' heavy armor and leaving him only wounded. Cyrus had gambled in making his charge alone, and now he faced the enemy line unarmed, with no defenders to guard him. In the blink of an eye, a spear shot out from the royal lines, dead aimed at the rival to the Persian throne. The sharp point struck Cyrus square in the face below the eye, and his body crumbled from his horse onto the dusty ground of Cunaxa. The conspiring prince was dead, and with one blow his battle and his cause were lost. The Greeks at the right flank, who had won handily over the Persians in disarray, heard only much later the fate of the Persian prince, how, after Cyrus had fallen, his head and right hand had been severed and held up in display of a royal victory over rebel forces. The armies of Cyrus nearer to the action, already well aware of what had happened, had fled the field, and as the command structure broke down, the surviving officers loyal to Cyrus chose to throw themselves on the mercy of the king or to join forces with the Greeks as their best chance of survival. Xenophon, the mercenary commander Clearchus, and the rest of the 10,000 hoplites found themselves abandoned in Persian land as their fortunes had vanished with one cast of a spear. They approached a Persian named Ariaeus, a close ally of Cyrus, with a promise to support him in his own bid to become king, but he refused. And then they offered their services to another leader among the Persians, a satrap of Asia Minor named Tissaphernes, and he also denied them, loyal to King Artaxerxes. In response, the satrap tried to make them surrender instead. But when his messengers demanded the Greeks turn over their arms, the mercenaries refused, still trusting in themselves to find a way through the crisis. Tissaphernes, working on behalf of the king, was hesitant to launch a pitched battle against the well-armed Greeks who had just crushed the army's left flank at Cunaxa. But at the same time, he couldn't let them leave his watch and march off into the king's lands without somehow bringing them to heel. So he chose a different way. He sent messengers to their camp, who brought forward to the Greek commanders a request that a truce between them be struck. The leader Clearchus once again projected power and boldness before a potential enemy, drawing up his ranks into fine formation to impress the messengers when they arrived. "Go tell this to your master," he answered them confidently, "that first of all we fight. We have nothing left to eat, and no one should dare talk with Greeks about a truce without first offering them food." Clearchus's posturing hit the mark, and the messengers soon returned not only with food, but with the promise of a truce. And so Tissaphernes, now joined by another agreement with the Persian Ariaeus and his men, undertook the duty of escorting the 10,000 out of their territory, and the great caravan began making its way north. All seemed well as the army and their Persian guides crossed the Tigris River and marched for 15 days up its eastern side, until they reached the great Zab River in the region of Media. But it was here that the tables turned. The satrap Tissaphernes graciously invited Clearchus, Xenophon's friend Proxenos, and the other foremost Greek commanders to dine with him at his tent. They had grown to trust Tissaphernes, feeling him to be a worthy ally who would honor the terms of their truce. And so, although the satrap's camp was miles away from the vast encampment of the 10,000 Greeks, Clearchus and the others saw no danger in accepting the request. They departed from the Greek camp and rode out to the meeting with Tissaphernes. And that was the last the army would ever see of their high command. Later on, a survivor, wounded to within an inch of his life, returned to the camp and relayed what had happened. How as soon as the Greek officers had set foot in Tissaphernes' tent, at a signal they were seized immediately, and their attendants were slaughtered. They were taken as prisoners, and in the days that followed were brought before King Artaxerxes, and the great king had them all executed, beheaded to a man, extinguishing any threat the Greek army would pose with a swift, ruthless blow. Tissaphernes was richly rewarded for his role. When the terrible scale of the betrayal had come to light, the loss of Clearchus, Proxenos, and their highest-ranking officers sent waves of despair through the mercenary camp. Their destruction seemed inescapable. Trapped in hostile territory, a world away from Greek soil, blocked by massive enemy forces, deep rivers, and near impassable mountains, the army was left now without guides, without provisions, without even its trusted veteran commanders. Among the ranks, Xenophon remembers how the Greek camp became a scene of fear and foreboding. Few men mustered in the evenings, staying isolated in their tents. Few fires were lit to cook their dwindling food. Only fleeting moments of sleep were had, as every eye was awake to the danger of attack from any side. The reality of surrendering to the Persians, casting themselves on the mercy of enemies who had no motive for generosity, began to seem inevitable. But as time would tell, and Xenophon would immortalize in writing, their tale was nowhere near its end. There was still courage left in the hearts of the 10,000, and even this darkness could still give way to dawn.